Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, hand coiling your own humbucker pickups, or else a scrappy upstart, programming the code for your own sequencer, this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of February 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Xavier who drove a Mini Cooper Countryman with an MC Chris bumper sticker and who was always trying to sell you what he claimed was a healing crystal. And old Xavier would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in: hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, and tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on my YouTube channel for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live, I'm playing tunes, I'm taking questions in the live chat, I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there on Sunday nights, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube. Go on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab. Finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time to contribute in that way. And if you're not in a position to contribute in that way, it's totally understandable. There's still a couple ways that you could help us out for free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store. Or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show, spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I really hope that you dig this week's chat with Allison. Our guest this week is a native of Alabama and Mississippi whose multi-decade career has navigated the hallways of both commercial country and taste-making Americana. After graduating college early, Allison Moorer joined her sister Shelby Lynn in Nashville, where her songs caught the ear of MCA Nashville president Tony Brown. Her debut album, Alabama Song, landed her on the Billboard country charts with a song of hers entitled A Soft Place to Fall. That very same song was featured in Robert Redford's film The Horse Whisperer and was subsequently nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1999. She would go on to perform at the Oscar ceremony. She has also been nominated for an Academy of Country Music Award, an Americana Music Association Award, and a Grammy. Her songs have been recorded by Trisha Yearwood, Kenny Chesney, Miranda Lambert, Steve Earle, and Hayes Carl. She has recorded for MCA Nashville, Universal South, Sugar Hill, and Rykodisc. American Songwriter dubbed her album Blood a masterpiece. The Guardian said of it, "From tragedy, Moorer somehow finds compassion," and Rolling Stone has called her work stunning and revelatory. Allison is a friend of mine, and she's been on the show before. She's back to talk about her newest memoir entitled I Dream He Talks to Me, about her son, John Henry. As always, it was a joy to catch up with her. Allison Moorer, thanks so much for coming back onto the show. I really appreciate it. You're here this time to talk not only about an EP that you're putting out, but a book that it's kind of tied in tandem with. I want to start first just to ask you, can you kind of describe the kernel of your new book, the idea for it, I Dream He Talks to Me, about your son, John Henry. How did the idea for that book first come to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to talk to you. It's been a while, and I always enjoy your podcast, and I'm pleased to be back with you.
Thanks.
I did release my second memoir in October 2021. The book is called A Dream He Talks to Me. It began actually before I even finished my first memoir. As things sometimes do, I'm sure you know this, sometimes you're working on one thing and something else will emerge that you have to sort of quickly deal with and then put back aside until you get through with the one thing. And then this book first emerged as an essay. I was in graduate school getting an MFA. I was in, I think, the third rewrite, or about to begin the third rewrite of my first memoir. And I was doing a nonfiction workshop, and I had an essay due. I was working on something or another that, was fine, that I wasn't maybe particularly passionate about. And as it usually happens with me, that bothered me. And then this other essay emerged. Sometimes you've got something that's really burning you up, and sometimes you're just doing the work, right?
Yeah.
So I was just doing the work, and then something came and set me on fire. And it was this essay that just sort of fell out about something that my son and I were going through at that very moment. And it sort of surprised me. I went, wow, I wasn't even aware that this was so close to the bone for me at this moment, because as you know this very well, when you're parenting, a lot of times you're just getting through the minute and you're getting to the next minute.
Yes. Lots of triage.
So anyway, yes, exactly. You've got a new one, so.
Yes.
So anyway, that's how it came to be. I did finish my first memoir in June of 2017 and took a little break, then promptly got to work on what would become I Dream He Talks to Me. So the book is about, my life with my son, John Henry, who was diagnosed with level 3 autism when he was 23 months. He has a severe speech disability. He does not use words like you and I do. We communicate through a combination of sign language, a program on his iPad, and a lot of deep looking, listening, thinking, trying to figure it out, detective work.
What is, because I'm pretty unfamiliar, what is level 3 autism? Like how do they do the gradations there?
Yeah, good question. Well, first of all, I should say that when John Henry was diagnosed at 23 months, they didn't tell me Oh, and it's level 3, which is the most severe designation. It
Okay.
usually level 3 is usually reserved for those who have either never developed language or they have lost their language, like my son did. So I didn't really find out that he was diagnosed as level 3 until a couple of years later, when I just happened to see it on an evaluation. Evaluations are something that we used to have to do a lot more than we do now. He's 11 now and soon to be 12. But in those early years, you do a lot of testing and a lot of evaluations, and so it just sort of came to light a little bit later. But I will say also that by the time he was finally diagnosed, and that was a bit of a long journey, I started trying to figure this out when he was about 17 months, and I noticed that he had started to stop using the language that he had learned and developed. So anyway, that level 3 is the most severe, and often comes with a severe language speech disability.
How did you, well, before I get even to how you started to communicate with him, how did you process that as a person going through that? I mean, that had to be really tough. There had to, and I don't want to say anything like insulting here or anything like that, but there had to be almost like a grieving process involved with learning that diagnosis. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. I think that's something that we do need to say. I think a lot of times in the special needs community, there's a lot of pressure on us to always spin things in a positive direction. And, I think that that's good thinking. I think I'm a believer in making the best of what you've got, but absolutely there is grief. When John Henry started to develop language, it was delightful. My little sweet little, very social 1-year-old cherubic baby, starting to learn words. It's thrilling, and that. And when that started to go away, it was incredibly scary. Completely. No one expects this to happen, right? When you are getting ready to bring a child in the world, and when you do, you think, oh, well, then, the sort of quote unquote normal trajectory here is that the development in this child will be average.
Yes.
The hope is it'll be above average. And what I've learned since I thought that is average is damn hard to be.
Yes.
It's one of the biggest lessons for me through this whole experience, and the main thing I want to say about it is, though we certainly have our challenges, and I want my son's life to be as easy as it can be. So do I want him to ultimately lose his diagnosis? I think that's the dream for a lot of people. The dream for a lot of people, and myself, would be that he would develop language. He would learn how to communicate and advocate for himself. He would be able to tell me and his dad and his stepdad and his family and his people what he would want, what he dreams, what he likes, what he doesn't like, because these things are often mysteries for us. But I will say that having this experience with my son has been one of the best things that's happened to me. And I'm talking about me, and that's a selfish thing to do because this is ultimately his experience. But as his mama, what experiencing this path of parenthood has done for me is make me more empathetic to human beings and what it can be like for some people to be here on this planet, more than I ever could have learned any other way.
Yes.
You don't ever want to see your child struggle. You don't want to see your child feel pain. And we generally don't want these things for anyone, but particularly with our children.
Yes.
And to become an observer of my son's experience and to also walk his path with him has been a gift to me. I might return it in order to make his life easier, but not for me.
Yes. It's funny. I really identify with that impulse as a parent. The idea that you want your kid's life to be easy and you want it to be, in a sense, average. Like I deeply, deeply identify with what you're talking about there because I feel it so much. But then I often second guess myself when I think about that because just as you said right there, like, we're forged ourselves by the challenges that we've been met with in life. And I wouldn't want to take away any of the challenges that I've been met with. So it's funny. It's like what we would accept for ourselves. You're like, oh, but I don't want that for my kid.
Oh, I
You know
know.
what I mean?
I know. And it's really hard to get on that page as parents, right? Because, I remember myself when I was young and I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And I thought I was smart enough to do it. And I tempted fate and I did stuff I shouldn't have done. And, I was too young to be doing any of it. Right.
Yes.
And I experienced pain and hurt and failure and mess ups and things that set me back. And, and here I am.
Yes.
And that's the human experience. And one of the things that I really struggle with is how do I protect my son? How do I do my best for him while allowing him to have his unique experience? I think that's the struggle with parenting. It's holding on and letting go at the same time. And that is the ultimate dance of humanity.
How did then, after your son begins to lose his speech, how then did you begin the process of communicating with him? I mean, that's a huge part of this memoir here and of the record itself. How did the communication process begin?
Well, so as soon as John Henry was diagnosed, of course, I jumped into actions like, what do we do to fix it? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? I drove his doctor crazy. I, read every book, for years and years, read every book, tried every diet. We started therapies, intense therapies when he was 2 years old. And tried to make the best decisions for his therapies, for his school, where he, all of the things. So where his therapist started us at such a young age was a system called PECS, which is an acronym for Picture Exchange Communication System. And it's basically, you have a little 2-inch by 2-inch card and it has a picture on it and the word for what that picture is. And things have come along so much in the world of special needs. It used to be that you would have to deal with a generic picture. Now it's a very easy thing to do to sort of put a very, a unique picture there of the environment. Basically, it's just, you teach the child to locate the card that has the word and the picture of what they would like on it, and they hand it to you.
Ah, okay.
So it's this sort of cumbersome thing where you have to carry around all these little cards and they're Velcroed and you have this board and fast forward to, okay, we're ready to do kind of that same thing on the iPad. There's a program called Proloquo 2, which basically functions in the same way, but it's all on your iPad. So it's with the touch screen and you don't have to have any actual physical. It's like putting all your CDs into your iTunes. So we do that. John Henry does use some sign language and some modified sign language. One of the things that I did not realize, and that a lot of people do not realize, is that with autism often comes motor skills challenges. And though John Henry is pretty good with gross motor, he gets very frustrated with fine motor, which is, when you just say you're picking up a blueberry or you're writing with a pencil, that's a fine motor skill. People don't necessarily think of talking as being both a fine and gross motor skill. So, I didn't really understand that until I began to put, even, no therapist ever said to me, one of the barriers to John Henry using speech clearly is developing his motor skills. No, I had to figure that out on my own. You would think that someone would have said it, but if they did, I don't remember it. So anyway, we use some modified signs because he is currently unable to make them all because some sign language is very complicated.
Yes.
And though he can do a lot with his hands, sometimes what he does is not necessarily voluntary. So we do that. And also, he does a lot of gesturing and leading. John Henry's very resourceful. He figures out how to make his wishes known. Like, if he wants to go get in the pool, he'll go in his drawer and get his swimming trunks and bring them to me, rather than take the time to find the picture on his iPad and come show it to me and say, he'll just bring me the shorts. So he figures out how to do it in the most efficient way for him.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. One of the pitfalls of being an artist is getting lost in the esoteric, the hypothetical, the sheer vastness of what could be. Art unmoored from reality is too ethereal to make any sense to its observers. But on the other side of the coin, art unmoored from a transcendent sense of meaning and beauty and reality ends up being nothing but clumsy propaganda. So the real trick, the place where true artists stand as much as possible, is the place in between. The place between what could be and what is. For many artists, family can be the force that helps them live in that middle space. And certainly, Allison's experience with her son, John Henry, has helped her live in that space herself. There's a wonderful poem by Kaveh Akbar that explores that space. It's entitled Rimrock. Without the benefit of fantasy, I can't promise I'll be of any use. Left to the real world, I tend to swell up like roots in the rain, tend to get all lost in hymns and astrology charts. Lately, I've been steaming away, thin as cigarette paper, cleaning up the squirrels that keep dying in my yard. Each cascade of fur feels like a little tuft of my own death. Am I being too dramatic? Mostly, I want to be letters. Not their sounds, but their shapes on a page. It must be exhilarating to be a symbol for everything at once. The bone caught in a child's windpipe, the venom hiding in a snake's jaw. I used to be so afraid of nature. Peering up at a rush of rimrock, I imagined how unashamed it would be to crush even me, a tiny, stuttering boy with glasses. I pictured myself reduced to a warm globe of blood and yearned to become sturdy in my endlessness, to grow heavy and terrible as molten iron poured down a throat. Still, I don't know the rules. If I go looking for grace and find it, what will grace yield? Broken ribs, probably, flakes of rust, an X marked in an atlas which itself has been lost for ages. Oh, but I do know what I am. Moonstruck, stiff as wet bamboo, I remember someone once sang here, once strung together a garland of near holy moments. It's serious business, this living. As long as the earth continues its stony breathing, I will breathe. When it stops, I will shatter back into gravity, into quartz. How do you think that this kind of method of communication has changed the way that you conceptualize communication in general? I mean, you're an artist. You've worked as an artist your entire adult life. Communication is your, I mean, in a very basic sense, your meal ticket, So how do you think this method of learning how to communicate with your son has affected your global understanding of communication in general?
Right. I mean, that's what I do, right? Is
Right.
communicate in whatever way. And I'm constantly doing it. Either, I've thought about this a lot lately. I basically earn a living by communicating what I think and feel, which is interesting. And so, and also, I'm a very verbal person. I try not to be a motor mouth. I have a lot of words in my mind, and so I tend to be wordy. And John Henry's father, of course, is known as a world-class talker. So it has been interesting for both of us to have to, and I can't speak for him, so I'll just say for myself, it has been a challenge for me to go, okay, well, I've got to figure out another way. So that means I slow down. I watch the body language. I watch, energy, if that makes any sense. I've had to develop a bit of a telepathic communication with John Henry too. Plus I'm his mama, and there is a lot of energy there. I think one of the most interesting things is that up to 90% of communication is nonverbal. So what we communicate in what way differs from person to person. But, I wonder sometimes what is lost with language.
That's a great question.
Because we really do rely on it. And that's why music is such a gift, and with, okay, so can I go ahead and talk about the EP? Because
Yeah.
This is the part that's so exciting about this, because music, as we know, is a universal language, and we don't need to know what language lyrics are in to feel what the emotion is most of the time.
Yes.
Right? So that in itself is, I honestly feel like I am here at this moment, and I'm a musician and I'm an artist in this lifetime, so that maybe I do have another way to see how to communicate with my son. So when I first knew something was going on with him, it was through music. It was the summer of 2011. John Henry was, 15, 16 months old. And his dad, Steve, and I were actually on tour together. And so we had John Henry out on the road with us. We had a day off. I'll never forget, it was a Sunday afternoon. We were in Canada somewhere, and I was in the front lounge of the bus, the tour bus, watching 60 Minutes. They were doing a piece on a teenage gospel choir, and they were singing Amazing Grace. I was holding John Henry, doing that sway that you do, the hold the baby sway. And I started singing with the television. And he burst into tears and pushed away from me. And I could tell that it was emotional. It was just, it felt to me like it was just too much for him to process everything that was going on. And so that's when I said, okay, something's going on here. And began that journey. And so for a while, I couldn't really sing in my full voice around John Henry. And I had to be careful about what music he heard, because music that had a lot of emotion in it would make him cry.
Mm.
There's this Puccini aria that's on one of those classical baby DVDs.
Yeah.
That I always had to skip through because he would burst into tears. And he finally, after 3 or 4 years, got to where he could listen to that song. So it's been this long journey of sort of John Henry taking it upon himself to sort of bolster himself against becoming too overwhelmed. And I cry every day, I have to say, and it's usually some piece of music I'm listening to.
Yeah.
So he started making up his own little tunes. He's always, his main entertainment has been his iPad, watching movies, watching, a lot of musicals. He could sit through most of The Sound of Music, which is about a 3-hour movie, before he was even 2.
Wow.
So he loves music and watches a lot of that kind of stuff. And he started making up his own melodies, 4 or 5 years ago, I think I first noticed. And so that perked my ears up, of course. And I began to learn the melodies that he would repeat. And I don't know, it just struck me as really cool that he was doing that. He had this one melody, da 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 da, which is I have no idea where that came from, but he would repeat it. So he would sing the first line, and then maybe I would join in, and if I sang the second line, he would smile, and then he would sing the third, and I would sing the fourth, and we would go back in this conversational sort of pattern. Then in the summer of 2019,
just to stop you there, that had to be soul shaking to be able to go back and forth with him like that at long last.
Was, and it still is. And I have to say, I have wondered so much, does he understand me? What is he getting receptively? What's, there's just so many things you don't know. Mm-hmm. And to get a confirmation like that was huge for me. Yes. Just absolutely, absolutely huge. You're right. The summer of 2019, we had moved down to Nashville, and John Henry was doing his summer program, which is at home. And he was at the park one day with one of his teachers, and he got on this old sort of squeaky piece of equipment, one of those gliders that goes back and forth, kind of like a seesaw, but not a seesaw. Mm-hmm. And it had a squeak in it. So she was sort of doing the glider back and forth in time, in this rhythm. Then he started to stomp his foot, and it made this squeak every time it went, in one direction or the other. And in between those squeaks, he started doing a beat, like do, 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 do.
Okay.
And it was incredible. They got home. She said, "Look at this." I was like, my goodness, that is so creative, because the squeaky glider, the stomping foot, and the singing in between these squeaks of the glider. And I was like, that is so rhythmic and so cool. And mm-hmm. It just was this huge, realization that, I always thought that he had a lot going on in his mind, but just to see evidence of that and to see this wonderful creative spirit emerge, it was just huge for me. So the first song actually grew out of that video that she took of him. So I took that recording. My co-producer, Kenny Greenberg, made a loop of it. And that became All We Have Is Now, which is the beginning of the EP. So that's John Henry singing, and then that flows into this song, All We Have Is Now.
So when you first play that back for him, like, his own melody that he's written and that you and, your co-producer have put together into a fully fledged song, what was his reaction to that?
smiled from ear to ear. He just smiled from ear to ear. There is no doubt in my mind that, well, on that particular song, he recognizes his own voice, of course, and he has watched that video of himself on that glider. And I mean, I don't know what sort of understanding he has of the process of turning that video into that recording. He may completely understand it. I don't know what he picks up. I have my suspicions that he's paying attention to way more than we know, and that he has so much in him that has yet to emerge. And it's just so exciting to think about. But I can totally tell that he knows it's his song. And that just, if it just existed as a way for him to know that something he created became something that people will hear and that brings them joy, I just, that's what I hope he understands. And if he does, that's enough for me.
Imagine when he understands that he gets some publishing. So it's interesting. How did the memoir and the EP kind of dovetail with one another?
Well, they don't necessarily. Mm-hmm. I tend to these days go into projects very deeply, I guess. That doesn't mean that with every book I write, I'm going to make a record or vice versa. God, no. I mean, I wouldn't get very much done in the rest of my life. And that's just a lot. But recently, I've had some big stories to tell, I think. And some, I think with Blood, writing a companion record to go with that memoir made perfect sense. With this, I don't know that I would have had any kind of musical companion piece if John Henry weren't emerging musically like he has been doing.
Got it.
So I just took his lead on it, if that makes sense.
It does. The next time you sit down to make a straight up Allison Moorer record that you're going to write yourself, in what ways do you think you've been changed by this process of this latest EP?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked. I tried to, this EP started with me sitting in the middle of the floor with my laptop open to GarageBand, surrounded by instruments. And that's how it started. I wanted to be as open as I could possibly be. I didn't want to bring any of my stuff to it, if that makes sense. I didn't want it to be, oh, this is a singer-songwriter thing, or this is a country thing, or this is a folk thing, or whatever. I just tried to be open and sort of channel what I thought John Henry would be into. And so it's very different. It started with beats. It's, a lot of electronics. I did a lot of MIDI stuff with synthesizers because there was so much in my head. That was really the only way I could approach it, was if I just built the core of it myself. So I sat there, for days on end, as long as it took me to sort of put this together. Just doing that, experimenting, taking those melodies. He had two main melodies. So that one I sang before, the da 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 da. In the song "Wish for You," that melody is the second verse of that song is that melody, and it's as instrumental because that is, in my mind, John Henry singing. It begins, that recording begins with an iPhone recording of him singing his melody and then breaking into this sweet little laugh, which is just the best thing. It's like, I'm so lucky that I have him recorded doing that. Yeah. It flows into the song, but then that second verse, I'm like, okay, here's your verse and here's your melody. And it really outlines that whole thing. And what I tried to do with those melodies, the other one is sort of this little classical sounding piece that's just very simple. It goes da 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 da. So for instance, that melody appears in the two songs, Stardust and Freedom and One Voice, which kind of appear as one song.
Mm-hmm.
They're two separate songs, but they go together. I put that melody in a key that I could do a lot with.
Okay.
So, and then and both melodies appear in the last song, which is Thank You. So if you pitch them in certain keys, you can manipulate, and make them do different things. So I spent a lot of time doing that. Just seeing where I could take those melodies, which was just so much fun. And I just had a ball. I didn't even know if I would even release it. I just wanted to do something as creative as I possibly could. And so I played a few things for Kenny, and then our process was I would sort of get sketches down as much as I could with my limited technical abilities. And then we would transfer everything over to his studio, and we finished it all at his place. So basically, it was just the three of us, John Henry's melodies, and then me and Kenny, just playing and having fun and saying, well, what if we try this? So we played everything. We played all the instruments except for the live drums and percussion and one flute part.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
well,
so I did all the vocals. I did, all of that stuff.
Well, I just think this, I get frustrated and I fall to pieces when one of my kids spills something in the living room. So the fact that you've taken this incredibly challenging situation and put it into a memoir and a record, I just think that's beautiful. I really take a lot away from that as a parent myself. So, and as a songwriter.
I think at the end of the day, the book is, it's not necessary. It is a book that, is a big component of it is autism, but it's also, I think, a book that a lot of parents will relate to regardless of their child's neurological status. Because as my friend Rose said to me, honey, it's a spectrum and we're all on it somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's just varying degrees of extremity. I call special needs parenting extreme parenting because it's like it's the same. It's just the extra.
Yes.
Yes. Because there's nothing about children that isn't gonna kill you.
Yes.
But this when you have a severe challenge, it just makes it a little bit, it just tweaks it.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately it's a book about hope. It's a book about love, and it's a book about making something beautiful about whatever it is that you have. And that's what the record's about too. It's just, I've got a little pearl. Well, I'm just going to string a necklace here.
Yes.
And I'm going to find them, damn it.
Well, I love that. Well, thank you for stopping by the show to talk about putting that beauty together and putting it into a cohesive and putting it into a package that you can bring to the world. I think that's a beautiful thing. And thank you for bringing us into that process.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure. And I'm just delighted that I still get to make stuff up.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Allison Moorer's latest memoir is entitled I Dream He Talks to Me, available at AllisonMoorer.com. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember An expensive drug habit is not a song. A compelling Instagram account is not a song. And most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself. And for you, just keep your eye on the song.